There's still slavery in the Sudan. The slavery was abolished in 1865 in the United States, the last power to do so. And today, there's still slavery in the Sudan. Castration takes place in the Sudan. The well-recognized genocide in the Sudan. And they also passed a resolution 1593, but they never enforced it. There's a difference between reality and rhetoric. What is happening in Libya is rhetoric because of the fact that the Libyan president said that if you do this, I will attack you. Rhetoric. But we saw a genocide in the Sudan. Why didn't the world react the way they're reacting in Libya?
The first thing before I can respond to your question, I must ask you, who is hypocritical? What kind of hypocrisy are you talking about?
To help me out.
Are you saying that the Western world is hypocritical? Is that what you're saying? Because they're not.
But how do we analyze this?
And precisely, that's what I'm saying. You see, we cannot analyze their assessment and their actions as hypocritical. We need to look at things from an African perspective if we are African.
Right.
And we need to understand that our interests are diametrically opposed. It's a game of chess.
Right.
They are playing a game that will foster their interest. The question is, what are African people doing? Are we playing a game of chess? Are we there to defend our interests? Or are we there to bolster up somebody else's interests? That's how we have to look at it. So, from my perspective, I'd say what the West is doing in Sudan, in Libya, is perfectly legitimate. That's what we expect them to do. The question is, what are we going to do in defense of our own interests? That's what African people need to wake up to. And what we need to recognize is that we need to resort to the kind of tactics that we used in the anti-colonial struggles. It's time for us to take up arms
to go back
and
to that.
to deal with the West, to tell the West that we recognize them as our enemies. We recognize what their objectives are, to steal our resources and to rob us of our human rights and our labor and everything. And we need to take a stand against it. That's what's missing today. And, unfortunately, we have been conned in this position. Because every time we have won an anti-colonial war, we go to the treaty table and sell out all our victories. You see? So that's the reason why we're where we are today. So we just have to cultivate some courage and recognize that the status quo cannot remain the same. It needs to change.
But how we supposed to inform our people? Because of the fact the information is not getting out our people, and our leadership is actually betraying us. Here's a case whereby when Ghana was just 7 years old, as an independent nation, Kwame Nkrumah came to the United Nations during the Congo crisis and told the world to back off from Africa. We don't even have a single African leader now. And when I say African leader, I just don't mean on the soil of Africa. Because we have Africa all over the world. We have Africa from Brazil to Haiti to Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago. Even there's Africa in Australia.
And whenever there is a true African leader, you see what they do. They assassinate them. That's what they do. If you look at Haiti, you see that Haiti is being punished today for liberating themselves. So whenever African people stand up for their rights, that is what happens to us. And unfortunately, because we have been witnessing that over and over again, it has made cowards out of us. And that's what we need to overcome. We need to be courageous enough to fight until we have our final freedom. You see, one of the things that has happened to African people is that we tend to live with a kind of psychology of instant gratification. We want to have the good life. You understand me?
Right.
And because of that, we do not think in terms of ancestry. the vertical lineage of our people, from ancestry to our furthest progeny, the progeny in the future.
Right.
When African people learn to think in the future again, because that's what colonization and slavery has robbed us of, the ability to recognize that our seeds are our own selves, that we never ever die. We live in our generations ahead of us. When we recognize that, we will be courageous enough to stand up, knowing that our offsprings will inherit a better life. Think about this. If our foreparents who were in chattel slavery were not courageous, where would we be today?
Nowhere.
If
We're probably all finished.
If Nkrumah's generation were not courageous and were willing to fight their oppressors, where would Ghana be today? So you see, the so-called leadership that we have in Africa today, as they have said before, they have simply hijacked the sacrifices of our ancients and our elders and our ancestors. And now we need to correct that again.
And I don't mean to draw on the gloom and doom, but there's a lot right on Africa right now that I don't even know where to start. The Sudan, especially, on this century, we still have slavery. And the so-called world justice have declared the president of Sudan as a wanted person. And yet this president travels around across the globe. A warrant has been issued for his arrest. And yet he travels across the globe. I come back. I don't know what other word to use to ask you this question. Is this not hypocrisy?
Well, I'll give you the same answer again. It's not hypocrisy.
Right.
It's simply our adversaries telling us where they stand with respect to us. And I'm saying we need to be smart enough to recognize where we are. It's an unfortunate thing that, as I said before, because we tend to be elitists, we want to be like our oppressors. It's written in the Christian Bible. Envy not your oppressor and choose none of his ways.
Right.
And that's what African people are doing today. And that's why we're in this condition. Can you imagine, just imagine, members of the AU or the former OAU sitting at any kind of table with these leaders from these countries,
right,
where slavery is going on today. Does that make any sense?
It does.
It doesn't make any sense. And so what I'm saying is, why is it that the people are not doing anything about it? Why are they accepting this? You see what I'm saying? So we need to recognize that there comes a time when the grassroots will have to take responsibility for changing the situation. That's what happened in the pre-colonial days. And that's what needs to happen again. In fact, I like to, very often I like to refer to Walter Rodney's book,
right,
How Europe Underdeveloped Africa.
Right.
And in fact, one of the prescription he presents, and in fact, perhaps it's the only prescription he presents. He's saying that if Africa is ever going to be redeemed, if Africa is ever going to be resurrected, what Africa has to do is to cut itself off from these predators. As long as this umbilical cord exists between Africa and those people who are intent on exploiting and expropriating us, we will forever be in bondage. And that's what we need to do. We need to make these drastic cuts. And you see, we need to make that psychological and intellectual cut as well.
Right.
Because what it is, colonialism has taught us a value system that we continue to support and maintain. So our expectations are somehow that our oppressors are going to do the right thing. They're going to do the things that they teach us, the Christian things that they teach us, to be moral, to be righteous, to be ethical, to be non-corrupt, all this kind of stuff. But they're saying one thing and they're doing something else. You call it hypocrisy, I call it tactic or strategy. That's basically what it is.
I remember, you know, the Chinese did something similar to what Walter Rodney is talking about. When Mao came to power, what they did was they cut the relations off from the rest of the world.
They closed themselves.
Everything.
And where's China today?
Number one in the economy. You know, an economic power. And then that's another thing that I want us to discuss.
We don't need to say anything else.
Yeah, China is now, they are the trading partner with the Sudan. China used to be Africa's friend when we were, you know, fighting for our, you know, liberation and other stuff. In fact, Mozambique, Angola, there's Guinea-Bissau, they got their weapons from the Chinese to fight their oppressors. Today, we have oppression in the Sudan, and China is their trading partner. China is the one supplying them arms and helicopters, you know, to send these Hellfire missiles into the villages. Where do we get new friends?
It's a contradiction. You see, we are our own friends.
Right.
That's the lesson. We have no friends. When people want your resources, and especially if they think that you're dumb, that's exactly what will happen. You know, it's time for Africans to get smart, to begin to use our brains, because we have the power of intellect.
Right.
And when we start using our brains and we start acting in our own self-interest, and we begin to recognize our own self-interest, you realize that the African race is the only race of people on the planet, or the only body of people who you can look at, you know, well, we have distinct features that identify us as a particular group. Do you realize that we are the only people who do not have a collective objective as a race?
True.
To say that we are working towards this together, that together, whatever it is, and therefore our policies and our programs and systems and principles would be crafted towards that
Sometimes we're moving in the opposite directions.
Yes. I mean, the last time this happened was around the time of the post-colonial movement, when the civil rights movement was going on here in the United States of America. The anti-colonial movement was going on in the Caribbean, in Africa, and other places in the world. That was the last time you had that kind of cohesive movement of African people in the world. At this point in time, you know, we are a people without a purpose.
It's not there.
Yes.
It's not there. As you just reminded me about the Lord Kitchener. This is a musician who came to Ghana during our independence era to compose a song for our country to be independent. Ghana is the name. That's what Lord Kitchener composed. Are we losing that connection?
Yes, and it's not an accident that we're losing that connection. If you observe, even if you observe the way media is operated here in the United States of America, you'll see that media is quietly taken away from black people. We have no way of communicating. Listen, you know, in the 60s, in the heights of the civil rights movement, black people knew what was happening to their brothers and sisters in various cities across the United States of America. We knew what was going on in Africa. We knew what was going on in the Caribbean. The information was not necessarily instantaneous as it is today through satellite and that kind of stuff. But guess what? We knew, and it meant something to us. So you see that to a great extent, the movement here in the United States of America inspired you know, other people, black people in the Caribbean, in South America, everywhere, in Africa. And by the same token, the movement in Africa was an inspiration to other people. That is why, for example, people like Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and all the reggae artists would sing about the various kinds of movements that were going on in Africa. Anti-apartheid movement, anti-colonial movement, and of course, many of the fighters, the soldiers in Africa will tell you the inspiration they got from listening to these kinds of songs that would talk about the struggle against the oppressors, and as well, you know, and reminding them that victory is possible and is not too far away. These are things that need to happen again for African people. So once again, we're talking about resurrection of courage. That's what African people need, as well as resurrection and redemption for the love of freedom. We have lost that.